Planning Board of the City of Plattsburgh, September 17th. Shalise, can I get a roll call on the board?
James Abdallah,
Yes.
Marissa Gilbert,
Yes.
Derek Rosenbaum,
Yes.
There he is.
Rick Perry,
I'm here, but I don't know for how long. I've been going in and out.
Reg Carter,
Here.
Loretta Rietzema is not here, and Kurt Gerbich is not here.
Okay. Okay. Melena, maybe it'd be nice if you can start out just giving sort of a summary of our purpose of the special meeting. And
I sure can. So we have gathered here today to talk about the comp plan update that the city is currently undertaking. Back in 2019, the city received a grant through the CFA process from the LWRP pot of money to accomplish 3 goals. One is to finalize our LWRP that was drafted back in 2016 and has been in draft form since then. To update our comprehensive plan, which, as you know, is quite old. Our last comp plan is from 1999. And then the third goal was to update our zoning ordinance. We have had 2 public advisory committee meetings for this project as a whole. We've gotten through updating the draft LWRP and getting it to the point where we can take the next step, which is have a public meeting, but we're kind of putting that on hold right now because of COVID, and we don't really know how to engage the public in a meaningful way to get their input for the LWRP before we have to submit it to DOS to finalize it. So while that's on hold and we're kind of working through the public meeting process, we're moving on to the comp plan. And we're sort of in the first step right now, which is setting the vision for the comp plan. And what do we want it to look like? Doing some deep dive into our current comp plan, other examples, getting feedback from, not only our PAC, but also city council and our other respective boards from the city. And then, moving forward to analyze all of that information, put it together, and then be able to present that to the public. So right now we're at the very beginning stages of the comp plan update. And this meeting is basically to get some big picture ideas from you guys, some goals that you want to see outlined in the plan, maybe some issues that you see with the current plan, some opportunities, etc. As you know, the comp plan is sort of a roadmap for the city. It's a catch-all for our vision and our goals. We're not here today to, solve all the problems in the city or, to fix our zoning ordinance. That's kind of a next step. But we do want to hear from you so that we can take all that information, give it back to our consultant, and then we can start drafting, the comp plan to then present to the public. So we did this meeting 2 weeks ago, I want to say, with the council, got some really great feedback. I requested that this board meet, also, give us some ideas, and then the zoning board as well. I haven't heard from the zoning board. I don't know what their plan is, but next steps after this meeting is to take all this info, meet with the PAC again, which we're hopefully going to do at the end of this month, and then try to figure out what to do with the public. So today is kind of just like a workshop roundtable. It should be fun. I do have a very loose agenda to try to get the conversation started and moving. I do want to try to keep this to an hour and a half at the most, so we don't rabbit hole too far. And I mean, I really think that's all we're going to need. I don't know if you guys want me to share a screen, that way I can take notes as you're typing, or if you want me to do that on the back end, whatever you think is easiest. That's pretty much it. I think.
Can I ask some questions? I went through this the last time, okay, when they redid the comp plan, redid the zoning. So I've been through it once, and I think actually with the same guidance people from Saratoga. And I seem to recall that they, as part of it, they used something called the charrette method. That's what I'm remembering, where they have neighborhoods and have small neighborhood meetings to say, okay, our neighborhood is this and our problems are this. Let's look at these very specific problems that relate to our neighborhood. Is that the plan again, or is that out of style now?
Nope, that's absolutely the plan. So we are way before that step. We're at the setting the vision step. And once we gather all of that data, then we'll present that to the public and we will have those charrettes, and it'll be a more informed meeting with the public to say, hey, look, like these are the city's goals. What do you see for your neighborhood? What would you like to see for your neighborhood? And then we collect all of that data from the residents, from the public, and then move forward with a draft comp plan. So we're at the step before that right now. And
Okay,
it might get dragged out a little bit with the public because right now all we can really do is Zoom. So we're still trying to figure out how to hold those charrettes. But yes, that absolutely will happen.
So, and I've got another couple general questions. You know, when I looked at the last comp plan, dated 99, which looks like it started in 96, they started that comprehensive plan. It took them 3 years to get through it. But then the last plan before that was 1982. Do we have a copy of that plan available?
I'm sure we do, probably on the city's website. I can check. I have never seen it personally. And I mean, as you can see, 1982 to 1999 was a large span of time. And now we're 21 years later. Now we're updating our comp plan. You're supposed to do it every 10 years. Hopefully we can be more diligent with that.
One of the things that they made very clear, and this is another sort of overreaching goal, I think, is they made it very clear in the beginning of the 99 plan that the 1982 plan was a complete, well, their words is this plan is an issue-oriented plan. So the 99 was an issue-oriented plan in their term, and the 82 plan was a more comprehensive look at the city.
Yeah, the 1999 plan, like I'm surprised at how little goal-oriented it is. It's very, very zoning heavy. So it looks at the various districts. It does have goals and objectives for those districts, but then most of this 1999 document is all just zoning recommendations, which, because we're updating our zoning ordinance, you know, unilaterally with our comprehensive plan update, I don't think that our comp plan should look like this anymore. And I mean, it obviously needs to inform our zoning ordinance, but I think our comp plan can be more of one of those vision documents, one of those goals documents, action related items documents, not a zoning recommendation document. So I think this whole document is absolutely going to change with this update.
and you have to remember why that document happened when it did. We had the money, we got the money because the whole entire base was now going to be zonable when it wasn't zonable before. So
Right.
they had to look and decide what's going to happen on the base. What are our uses on the base? You know, RC2, and invent some whole new categories that didn't even exist before. So that's why it's very heavy. And then of course we had center city problems. So the center city problems were being addressed, okay? And the base and how the base was going to be developed was being addressed. And that's something that I can see right now that we need to think about changing the zoning over there and what the path is over there, because clearly the entire oval and that area has taken a real residential flavor. There aren't bars, restaurants, bike rental places, ice cream shops, card shops, all these things that they thought might happen along and near the oval and the waterfront. It didn't happen. Okay, it just didn't take that path. It took a residential path. And I think under the current zoning, if somebody stuck something similar to the turtle into the middle of the oval right now, we'd have a lot of unhappy people, but they probably could do it.
Right.
So that's an area that again needs to be looked at compared to what was originally planned, what they thought the direction it was going to take, and the direction it actually took.
Okay. So the way that I had our agenda set up, I don't know if you have it in front of you right now, or if you want me to pull it up, but the first thing that I wanted to talk about was challenges. So challenges within the city, for example, you know, we have a lack of expansion opportunities, right? Like most of development that's going to happen in the city is going to be infill development or redevelopment of existing properties. So that's obviously a challenge. So, you know, do we need to identify some opportunities? Like, you know, the thing that comes to mind is the Skyway Plaza, right? So right now that's very underutilized. It's a giant parking lot. It's a great opportunity for infill. So, you know, maybe that's something we identify in our plan is infill opportunities within the city. And then after we talk about challenges, maybe talk about opportunities. What does the city have to offer? We have the LWRP, we have other planning documents that highlight our waterfront opportunities, but we're more than just our waterfront. And then maybe we can talk about big vision goals, land use, and we can maybe, if you want to drill down into neighborhoods, we can. I had that on here for council because I know they represent certain wards and they probably had issues that they wanted to talk about specific to their areas. But it's really up to you guys. But if you want to start maybe with our agenda, work through some challenges. If you guys want to just shout out stuff, I can take notes. So Marissa, I'm going to write down your note about the oval and zoning.
When you talk about our agenda, you're talking about the, starting with challenges, going down to opportunities, just going down right down.
Yeah, I mean, it can be more of a fluid conversation than that, but if we want to start maybe with challenges, and then I can just start taking notes and, we can go from there.
Okay. Just start off with each bullet item.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, under challenges, the first bullet, lack of expansion opportunities. Any board thoughts?
I think we just don't know what we're doing because we haven't done this before. This is not the way we usually operate. So I'm thinking this meeting is just going to be a little bit weird.
Yeah, and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's a workshop. It's weird because it's Zoom. I think if we were all sitting around a table, it would be different.
It might be, yeah.
Zoom's a little bit weird. When I did it with council, it wasn't that odd. I think because we were all in the council chambers and I was taking notes on a big board and it was kind of more of a round table. It is a little weird on Zoom. I'll give you that.
I mean, I guess in my thought, in terms of expansion opportunities, I think you really hit on the discussion of infill. There are properties in the city that are either vacant, can't be removed, currently being cleaned up. What opportunities does our community through zoning and everything else give for redevelopment of those properties in the future?
Right.
But identifying all of those locations is sort of a key component.
Yeah, the other factor is property reuse.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a change of use in certain properties that would be, more in tune with futuristic view. And I think this is really what the exercise is about. How do we envision the community to look like in the future? And then the process of obtaining that goal, is done through the regulations that we put in the zoning. And I had mentioned previously, ironically, my comprehensive plan is a step in the past. I look at the old French Quarter, and that's, where I brought my kids up. We had Fountain and Lucas and M&C Market and CNC Grinders and, Condo Pharmacy. There was a sewing machine shop. Might have been a bit dense of commercial uses for a smaller neighborhood, but I think that's what truly made the neighborhood what it was. The small mom and pop type operations. And when I look at a comprehensive plan, I look at the creation of neighborhoods and how we can evolve that vision into reality is what our exercise is all about. And I think there's a lot more vision than what I have, but that's what I would like to see. I would like to see those. And when you think about it, if you don't have to get in your car and drive to the mall or drive to Hannaford's or whatever grocery store there is, and you can walk down to the little corner market, you're creating a healthier environment because you're getting exercise. You're not putting pollutants back into the air. So you're creating an environmental society that's a bit more healthier than what it was previously. And that's the side of zoning and planning that, isn't as apparent. How we structure communities to to grow and be independent and prosper in other ways. You know, that's my quick view of what it is we're doing and what the intent is.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the conversations that I had with council when they brought up, specific neighborhoods was the concept of a 15-minute neighborhood where you're within 15 minutes walking distance to all of your service needs. Right now, if you think about, the streets that you mentioned or Saley Avenue, that convenience store on Saley Avenue is not an allowed use. That's pre-existing non-conforming. So that can't happen right now per our zoning code. And it should be allowed to. So I think, there's a movement right now towards smart growth, which we've talked about a lot at other meetings, especially with the Durkee project, and allowing for mixed use, as long as it conforms, in a way that is still sympathetic to the neighborhood. It's not like you're putting a hammer factory next to a senior housing facility, and there's a move away from our current Euclidean zoning, which is all land use based. So it's industrial over here, residential over here, commercial over here, and a movement more towards form-based code, which as long as it looks like something, as long as the design is incorporated well into the neighborhood, it should work, because people do want to be able to walk to the store. They do want to be able to walk to work, etc. So I think our new comp plan should definitely focus around those smart growth concepts.
One of the
One thing.
one of
Go ahead, Laura.
the projects that I'm involved with very peripherally is an initiative that is being in very early stages, being looked at by the hospital in conjunction with the Y in terms of addressing the needs for the south part of the city, which does not have a lot of services available to them. And certainly they are not close to health services, exercise opportunities, stuff like this. And I know that in terms of looking at a place to develop, they're talking about the wellness center that just shut, that the hospital is closing. And that area on the new base, does it even make sense to say new base anymore? Does every, I still call it the new base.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay. But that whole area down there, with the creation, I mean, there are a lot of services that have been popping up down there or locating down there. They're not popping up, but you have NAMI down there, you have MHAB down there, which is, they offer a lot of services, not just to their clients, but to anyone who wants to avail themselves. They have banks come in and do financial planning. They have, they've got an exercise facility, et cetera, et cetera. And so the Y is looking at relocating. And so that's one of the, recognizing that access for the city population that lives on the south end of our city, they have trouble accessing the Y. That's not immediately available to them. And so if the Y was to move down to the hospital's wellness center and use that and start building out of that, the hospital is looking at creating a satellite, for instance, a satellite primary care clinic down there so that health services would be available and would be closely available geographically for people on the south end of the city. And I don't know if that's in the purview of what we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely. The lack of health services in the South Plattsburgh, I didn't even realize that was an issue. So I'm definitely going to write that down, and that kind of ties into identifying partnerships with other agencies.
Absolutely.
That would be CVPH, right? So,
yeah, and that's what, so CVPH is working with the Y right now for identifying, how they could work together to create, a really comprehensive community center that would provide daycare, that would provide, exercise facilities, that would provide uh, physical rehab opportunities, and then, draw in other services that are also already locating down there, whether it be NAMI for mental health issues and services,
Sure.
and the recovery center that has opened up on MHAB's property.
And
So
Plattsburgh
there's-
Housing Authority just developed 40-something units on New York and Montana Avenue. So there's a lot of housing going up over there.
there's a lot, yeah,
It's
so
a great location. You're close to Yando's for grocery stores. You have a bank nearby. There's fast food. It's
yeah,
a
the
great
credit union the Dannemora Credit Union that just went up, you've
Yeah.
got Kinney's down there, so stuff is starting to get developed down there, and so I don't know what we would be doing in terms of making, of supporting those efforts and those projects.
But the comp plan is a great catch-all to identify all of these projects, issues, challenges, so that when we want to go after grant money, we can say, hey, we identified that in our comp plan.
But that does bring about an interesting point in that every property that you just talked about is in the town of Plattsburgh.
They're not
The
city
line is
properties.
there.
So is a potential partner in our comprehensive plan, the town of Plattsburgh,
Absolutely.
which would be wonderful. I mean,
Yeah, that would be great.
regional development is awesome.
Well, and that jumps into everything going on with Reeves Lane too, which is our biggest chunk that we could expand into.
Where's that?
Whether it becomes city property or not, I mean, there's development potential there, obviously. But I mean, I just did a quick look at the GIS map and based on a real quick overview, just tried to look at some pieces that might be opportunities or that really are the only pieces that are left. I mean, once the city acquired the base and all that vacant land, that's all been pretty much developed now at this point. So the only thing that's left, really the biggest piece is that I can tell is Dooley's land off of Boynton.
Right.
And that's, I believe, residential.
What about the
No.
parcel that wanted to be a button factory at one point?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it's behind the roadhouse,
Aldi's.
right?
behind
Kind of
Aldi's.
behind Aldi's. There's a parcel there which kind of weirdly
Right.
bridges commercial versus very straight R1. Okay, where you got to make sure it's not something that's upsetting that entire R1 neighborhood over there. But that's a pretty big undeveloped chunk, isn't it?
There's also
8
Mirren's
acres.
property over by Wilcox Dock.
Yes.
Yeah, Marissa, the parcel you're referencing is 8 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a piece on Healy Lane, Healy Avenue. That's not quite as big. I think that's 2 or 3 acres, but there's a piece there. But I mean, then you've got, I mean, just going down where Lakeside Products is, I mean, or Lakeside Container, right on McDonough or Hamilton.
J Street.
Yeah. And that's it's right near you, but that's obviously privately owned still, but I mean, there could be a lot better uses for something there. And I know you guys are working on, the potential hotel site, but also the wastewater treatment, and then going further towards where the farmer's market is. I mean, when MLD got out of there, there's 8 acres there, which I don't know if that's all tied in with the hotel or if that's separate, but
It is right now. It's all one city-owned lot. I mean, I think it's 3 different parcels technically, but it's all city-owned. We're currently working through the subdivision of that property. I think we plan on creating one city-owned lot where the old MLB yard is, retaining all of the waterfront, the wharf, and then cutting off a lot for the development of the hotel.
okay.
The other big chunk that we have is the Crete Center. And would that be within the purview of because
Absolutely.
that continues to be an albatross?
Not just the Crate Center, that we'll call it the former dump.
Yeah.
Well,
You know what I'm talking about, right? What used to be smoking and on fire as you drive out.
Oh, yeah,
the streets
yeah.
when I was a kid.
I have maintained for a long time that if anyone wants to look online, 2 cities that totally transformed themselves, created on parcels of land very similar to where we have the Crete Center in Traverse City, Michigan, which was a down and out town. I was stationed at the Coast Guard Air Station there. And they were just a down and out mill town. Everything had left and there was just nothing. And they allowed a, not without a lot of, debate, shall we say, but they allowed a resort to come in and on a big chunk of land like we have at the Crete on the water. And within 2 years of it being completed, it hosted the National Governors Convention. It is now one of the most sought after sites for national meetings of groups like mayors or governors or, any large gatherings. And it put Traverse City on the map. And the other city is Coeur d'Alene in Idaho. And on Lake Coeur d'Alene, and that town had just gone to nothing. I mean, it was just deader than a doornail. And they had a resort that came in on the lake. And it's actually very contained. It's extraordinarily beautiful. I've been there twice now when I was driving cross country to different assignments. And the resort has integrated itself completely into the community along the line, as did the Traverse City Resort. Doing things like Prime is proposing in terms of having a brewery that is also going to create internships and classes in conjunction with SUNY, integrating into the local community that way. And the resort in Coeur d'Alene did the same thing in terms of marine biology opportunities. I mean, they literally created a marine biology school that works with and through them using Coeur d'Alene at Lake Coeur d'Alene for all of their research. And if you ever have a chance to go to this place, it's incredible. I mean, they've got, what do they call the planes that land on the water? Seaplanes?
Seaplanes.
Yeah, seaplane tours, because they're up in the Rockies. And so they've got seaplane tours, they've got parasailing, they've got windsurfing competitions that get international draw. They have the fishing tournaments that we have. If we created something like that, where the Crete Center is.
Yeah, absolutely. The city conducted a beach feasibility study a few years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say 2016, but I can't be sure. And there were 3 different concept layouts for that whole area, not just the beach, but the Crete as well, and the old landfill site. And they're absolutely amazing. It's just, you got to get the money to do that. But I think, the city really does need to maybe focus a little bit more on that area, because the location is absolutely amazing. It's at Cumberland Quarters, off the highway, near the ferry. On Route 9, obviously the beach is one of the city's biggest assets. So it does really need to become a focus for community development.
Absolutely. I mean, we would become such a destination.
Absolutely.
Between the Northway, we've got an international airport.
Yep.
The sad part of all this is these things have been studied. There've been
Over and over.
presentations and proposed. When I first sat on the Strategic Tourism Committee, we laid out a full-blown development, just as Loretta was describing. I mean, there were hotels, there was a museum concept, and I've met with Live Nation to create a concert venue there. We've had momentum to get an amphitheater set up out there. There have been, the first meeting that we had of the Strategic Tourism Committee, I brought 2 cases of studies and plans, and I threw them on the desk and I said, look, we can put all of our time in trying to reinvent everything that's been discussed, or we can start implementing plans.
Yep.
Guess what?
Yeah, the plans.
There's still plans today.
At the very least, if we could create something where, because right now, I don't know how all of that property is structured in terms of zoning and ordinances and everything else. But if that could all be available to a project so that if we can find someone to come in and invest, I'm trying to find someone who, you know, has a couple of $1 billion. I haven't found him or her yet, but I'll let you know when I do. In all honesty, though, this is literally serious, and I found out about this recently. One of my best friends, her aunt, who is a gazillionaire, she was the oh come on, one of the major insurance companies out of Hartford. She's the CEO, and she's on the executive board of directors for Marriott. You know what Marriott could create where the Create Center is? With one of their themed resorts.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, what you're saying, Rick, it's been done over and over, all over the world. And so we wouldn't even have to, you know, we're not coming up with a new concept. But we would have to, before anyone's even going to sniff around and invest any time or energy, you know, I think it would be extraordinarily helpful if, as part of something like this, we've already gotten rid of the obstacles that are immediate, which is, oh, well, sorry, you can't do that because we're not zoned for that. So
Right.
take the project someplace else.
Well, of course, there's the two things to think about here that have nothing to do with zoning. Number one, the Crate inheritance and the ties to the money that built the Crate Center, okay? Where if you inherit something and it's a restricted thing, then that becomes a concept of, is how you invested the money still restricted? And that always comes up as part of the discussion. The other part of the discussion is alienation of public parkland law. Big problem. You need the state legislature to approve if you're actually going to sell and alienate what is considered public parkland in New York State. So that's nothing to do with our zoning. That's super hurdles to deal with.
Right, but again, we can start the process. I mean, you can't even talk about the project if you haven't taken care of those hurdles first.
I think having a strong comprehensive plan with public support goes a long ways to getting to those hurdles, not necessarily getting over them, but getting to those hurdles.
Right, I mean, we have to get to a point where it's something that there's at least some agreement on as a community that this is what we are willing to work for. I mean, you know, when Lewis, you know, started trying to get an air base built back in the 50s, you know, he had to start someplace. And everyone thought he was nuts for, you know, getting the Air Force to come on up here and create an Air Force base. But he did it, you know, and he overcame the hurdles. And there's no reason why we can't do it, except that we decide we can't do it.
So I have notes here about the importance of infill development, and I've identified a few locations that you've, you know, recommended, including the Crate Center and the beach. Do we want to talk about any other challenges? It doesn't have to be ones that are on my list, but
I have
anything
a
else?
question, Maureen. Does this process include developing a vision statement
It sure
that
does.
represents
So that will be the next
what the
step
key
after we
stakeholder, excuse me?
Yep, after we meet with you guys, we'll meet with the larger advisory committee. And then after that meeting, Saratoga Associates will draft that vision statement, and then we'll present that for feedback.
And does the vision statement define what the key stakeholders in the community would like to see?
Absolutely. I think it's a broad statement about the overall vision and goal of the document as a whole. It's not going to be project specific. It's not going to be area specific, but I think it's just a broad stroke vision.
So ideally, when we're talking about projects, given that vision statement, we'd be able to prioritize and sequence.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
And that seems to be something that we're missing now.
Right. Sorry, my phone's ringing.
You know, to finalize our thought with the Crate Center, and I'm going to say the bigger term of recreation space, city and property that the city owns, I think there needs to be a very strong look at our goals, long-term uses of all of our open spaces and our recreational spaces within the city.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I could be mistaken, but I don't think we have a recreation master plan right now, which,
Which, once again, maybe the comprehensive plan is something that generally talks about that and recommends something. But given where we are today, we look at the crate, we've talked about the crate. I mean, I can talk to people before me in the city, and to Rick's point, they talk about plans and what's been proposed and what's been, what I mean, the opportunities that have been, I guess, not chosen at times. And here we are, we got the crate closed.
right. And a lot of our parks that, I mean, I hate to use the phrase dead, but they're not invigorated. They're kind of spaces that people don't go and hang out. They're not great places to bring your kid and just kind of dwell. I can't really think of any great parks downtown. Obviously, we have, McDonough Monument and the other monument, but honestly, a lot of our parks do need to be reinvested in.
I was going to say, and there, I haven't seen any, in my thoughts, major reinvestment in our parks since before I was born. I mean, you look at the infrastructure in the different parks that is now there now. I think most of it predates this, the 70s or older.
Sure.
And then on top of that, if you look at the use of the parks, when I was growing up, every high school and Catholic school used Bailey Avenue as their football field. I mean, Lights was just that,
Yeah.
the community park.
It was a social event, right?
It was.
Yeah.
I mean, you parked up and down the road. That is no longer. So I mean, obviously they have, in my use, they have co-ed soccer on what was the football field. Is that,
Yeah.
but you don't have those leagues anymore right now. So, rethinking recreation in terms of those large spaces in the city is important.
I think another thing, and this has been mentioned to me just literally by people who are out in the yard, parents walking kids in strollers or with young children. I get complaints all the time, and people don't know I'm on the planning board. They'll stop and talk because, I'm working out in the yard, and they just chat. And the lack of sidewalks for instance, on Cumberland Avenue, when you get down by Wilcox, there are no more sidewalks. When I first moved here into this house, I came from Portland, Oregon, where no one has yards there, but they have unbelievable parks, and they have fabulous bike lanes and sidewalks. And every single day I threw my kids into the stroller and went to the park. And that's what everybody did because no one had yards to play in. And when I got here, I tried to walk up to the Bailey Avenue Park, and you get mowed down in traffic. There's no sidewalk. There is no way to safely push a stroller up to Bailey Avenue Park.
Yeah,
And
we'll definitely identify the need to adopt the complete streets concepts into our smart growth plan. There's a big movement right now to take the streets back, to create spaces that are available to the public that are social spaces. Because now, I mean, we're not going to malls anymore to shop, which was our social outing, back in the 80s and 90s, because we're shopping online, and we spend a lot of our time at home and a lot of our time, through social media on the internet, et cetera. So we're looking for more social avenues in our downtowns, and sidewalks need to be that, catalyst to bring people downtown, and the parks. So invigorating both our parks and our sidewalks, just focusing development more on the pedestrian and the social experience, I think is absolutely important.
yeah, I think that's really, really key, because a lot of people talk about their frustration with, not being able, especially during COVID, it's really brought it to a fore.
Yep.
People are desperate to get outside, especially during the lockdown.
Yeah.
But, there weren't even sidewalks to walk on. And that was a source of frustration. So, yeah, I think that's something that would be and that's something we can do short term.
Yeah.
That's a short term focus that we can realize.
With that, with that idea of walkable communities and visions for that, I think especially in the city, just given what we deal with at the planning board, that it needs to be a very clear look at all of the standards, maintenance, responsibilities. It's nice to say walkable streets, but if you don't have anybody, any standards, how they're going to be installed, I mean, we can, or how they're going to be maintained or who's responsible for them. It has to be a larger discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the issues we're having. I mean, all communities have it, but with the arts park, it's like, great, we'll have a brand new, beautiful park, but then in 2 or 3 years, what's that going to look like if you don't have a maintenance plan to keep it up? So yeah, maintenance is absolutely an issue with any public property, parks, sidewalks, etc.
Well, it happened to us downtown, and it just got rehabbed. A group of volunteers that at least did one side of the street on Upper Bridge, where the clock is installed and the lighting and
The weeds, oh my God, it's been so bad.
oh my God. And I remember when they planted the plants, and I remember saying to one of the guys, those aren't hardy here. Why are you planting those? They're marginal. They're going to die in a couple of years. Oh no, they're fine. Whatever. And then nobody ever took care of them and the shit died. Pardon me.
And once again, back to the planning board, if you look in our time here, I think Main Road was rebuilt last year. That road, a function of not having standards, had sidewalks in some areas, sidewalks not, sidewalks that were 3 feet wide, sidewalks that were 5 foot wide. I mean, it's nice to promote things, but if you don't have all the infrastructure in the background to support it, and then the guidance,
Yeah, absolutely. So I think our comp plan would identify the vision goal to have complete streets throughout the city, and that would inform our zoning code to then have street standards and what those street standards are for, it could be different for each neighborhood. Maybe some neighborhoods like in the West End are more, rural with bigger setbacks, and they don't want sidewalks in their front yards. They don't want to maintain sidewalks. So I think, our comp plan can look at that concept as a whole, and then it will inform our zoning code. And then that's when we come up with the street standards and maintenance, et cetera.
Yep.
Should the plan include consideration of technology as it relates to a comprehensive plan, or the environment as it relates to a comprehensive plan?
What do you mean by that? Technology as far as like thinking about, self-driving cars, or what do you mean by technology?
Well, it may be, I don't know at this point, it may be, a commitment to support
Like electric
in
vehicles.
various areas, whether talking about cars or broadband, just making certain that our residents have ready access.
Okay, I love that concept.
I think the broadband one it's obviously critical, especially where you've got, remote learning, which,
Right.
it may in fact become a permanent part of learning going forward. As education looks at how they're going to be doing things, and having broadband across the board is so important.
Another area I was wondering about, if it should be a separate segment, is just this whole notion of historical areas.
Mm-hmm.
And how committed we are to that, and what that really means in terms of ownership and the responsibility that you're taking on.
I know we had talked about very briefly about creating a separate board for historic site review. That can be something that we identify in our comp plan, that we're committed to, preservation of our historic districts, and we want to maybe look at creating that historic review board.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest keys to that is the public outreach to those areas, especially those areas that are considered historic districts or areas today.
Yeah.
When I look at the creation of those, there's not a lot of information about it, but there must have been some type of idea that those areas were going to be supported with some type of other funds to bring them along. And truthfully, creating another historic board or creating more historic areas, I think are great ideas. But if the community can't afford it,
Right.
it's, you know what I mean? Or there's not opportunities for funding, other funding sources or something to help support it. I mean,
Yeah.
you end up where we are today.
On the other hand, also, we haven't we haven't added new things as historic. In other words, a house built in the 1920s is now 100 years old.
Right.
Craftsman style homes actually theoretically almost qualify as being historic. And yet nobody's really driving any kind of a project to let's recognize more historic homes. Maybe they would have less restrictions on them, but at least recognize them as historic. And there are certain neighborhoods that, well, like my neighborhood has some really nice houses that are 100 years old, essentially. I mean, my house is 1952, but some of the others are nice. And then also Rick, you would know the name, those steel-sided homes. Can you think of the name? You're muted. What are they called?
Ron Nolan used to own one on,
Yeah,
on
like
Sanborn.
Sanborn,
Yeah.
right? And they're like really different and historic, okay? And so in theory, we should also be promoting the recognition of newer historic homes and buildings that are not on the register now. But like you say, there used to be a lot of tax credits and things that people could get, non-business human, regular 1040 tax return tax credits that are gone. They're just, the government doesn't encourage that spending like it did in 1976. So that's kind of why we aren't headed in that direction. There's no tax benefit there. There's no money to be saved.
And I once again, without that component, you know, that's tough for the residents of the city to expand that program.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Well, in addition to expanding, I think we can also maybe identify building upon what's already existing as historic. I know you guys are aware of some of the DRI efforts for rebranding downtown as, you know, historic, Discover Plattsburgh, et cetera, the new banners that we have. And we're also working on an interactive map that will have different routes through the city based on historic designation. So say you really like Queen Anne Victorian architecture, follow this route through the city, down Bancroft Street, et cetera. So we are making some efforts to highlight our history, but I think it'll be important to note that in our comp plan, a partnership with the Clinton County Historical Association to get outside the DRI footprint with that, you know, that history trail, linking all the way to the new Battlefield Memorial Gateway that the town is developing over on the south side, and also linking all the way to the beach, et cetera. So I think it's important for us to build upon that history and tourism, heritage tourism, essentially. Like that. Okay. So it's almost 1 o'clock now. I know we've kind of had a pretty fluid conversation. We're not really working down our agenda, but I think this is great. I'm taking lots of notes over here. I don't know if you guys want to keep rolling until 1:30, if you want to cut it hard at 1 o'clock. It's up to you.
I have a little bit more time if people want to keep talking.
What's next on the agenda? I don't have a copy of the agenda, so.
Do you guys want me to pull it up on the screen?
Yeah, let's do that.
Actually,
Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. So we talked about some challenges. I don't know if you guys want to, I know the council kind of dove into the housing market and issues around student housing in SUNY Plattsburgh.
so, you know, on housing market and specifically student housing, I think there really needs to be some correspondence with SUNY in terms of where they stand with housing and their projections.
Yep.
I mean, that's I think that's an important collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously the issue is we need SUNY Plattsburgh economically. There's a lot of landlords that depend on students in our economy in general, downtown and uptown depends on SUNY Plattsburgh students. But at the same time, you hear, I mean, Rick knows, being the building inspector for so long, you hear a lot of complaints in that office about student housing. So it's finding that balance, I guess. And I think you're right, identifying or creating a stronger relationship with SUNY is absolutely key.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's resurrecting some of the relationships of the past. Because we've had, campus community coalitions that I actually opened an office on campus for about 3 school years, just to listen to the input of students. And it was a rare occasion that I got anything from the students. But the effort was made that the community cares enough about you that we have a presence here. And, we can only make it better if we have a working relationship. So that the point was made, and I think administration saw it as a benefit. And we did a lot of very creative things that really, I don't know why, but they kind of just got dropped. I think we need to revisit some of those things that in the past that we let go.
I believe SUNY had a community relations coordinator, or I don't remember the title, for a few years, but I think due to funding, that position was cut. But I think the whole intent of that was to get students more involved with the community.
Well, actually, it was done through Bill Laundrie and Brian Hartman.
Okay.
Very instrumental and both very strong within the community. And they are great resources. I think Bill's retired now, but Brian, I think, is the head of like student life. But these are people that we really want to engage in, as Jim had said. And there may not be an official position within the campus for them, but these are look at Jacob Avery, who was, he was the president of the student association, and I believe he's running for council today. So, that's an evolving commitment and connection from many individuals from the campus that really have taken Plattsburgh up as being their home, and they want it to be a better place just as we do. Our goals and missions are the same. It's just we need to connect.
Yep. And I've heard from Clinton Community College that, and I'm sure it's the same at Plattsburgh State, that they obviously have issues retaining students, and we have issues retaining that workforce. So once they're schooled here, they leave the area. So I think you're right, creating that partnership and getting that commitment from SUNY Plattsburgh benefits everybody, especially the community, in retaining that workforce. Being, on the planning board, seeing lots of projects come through, whether it's for historic site review, et cetera, in the neighborhood of SUNY Plattsburgh. I mean, what are your thoughts on zoning as far as single family use in that area, or, maybe allowing more multi-family uses, et cetera? Or is that something that we want to keep our zoning pretty strict to not allow that to happen? Because it's—
Oh boy, are you asking the wrong question of me? I am absolutely keep it as strict as possible. The current zoning is right what we need to prevent further expansion of student intensive housing, because we can't discriminate against who the tenants are.
Right.
And perhaps if we get this new landlord thing in, and again, that's changed multiple times, but if there's a more strict watching of what's happening with apartments and having property managers and stuff, perhaps it could be loosened up because there'd be somebody in charge. somebody that's going to keep the noise and the parties and the parking on the front lawns and all that stuff that irritates the people that live there year round from happening. Over occupancy is the problem. And the side effect of that is when you have student housing so close to the college and it's based on per semester rates and the landlords are very used to collecting a very high rent, it is very, very unlikely to get, I'm going to call them normal people, normal working people who have to keep a regular schedule to move into those apartments because the rent is artificially high, being based on the semester rate. So you can never get those apartment buildings to convert back over to a mix. It just doesn't happen. The monetary challenge is just not going to happen. The landlords aren't going to take less rent. And maybe COVID actually is going to even some of this out because there will be fewer people on campus, fewer students renting. And in theory, under our zoning code, if you drop below your grandfathered amount, okay, and you have less people there, you end up losing your grandfathering. So hopefully that will kick in and we'd have less density in that method.
Yes, the biggest question comes into then is that a single family residential neighborhood then?
It's not a single family, but it's the key is any multifamilies that are already there are plenty. They're more than the neighborhood can already bear. So current zoning keeping you from taking a huge building and converting it to multifamily housing makes sense. And also, if you look at the code, you can convert it to many other business type uses, law office with an apartment upstairs, bed and breakfast. Then we have the conversion of an existing structure, creating one accessory apartment. Then the accessory apartment can have up to 3 bedrooms as long as the building is owner occupied. There's lots and lots of economic opportunities there for people that own large homes other than conversion to super multifamily housing.
But that brings up, I guess, the point that, the city, like other areas around the US, I mean, everywhere really, there's a housing shortage. There's that missing middle housing. So there's typically, people who are well off or able to find housing, but there's a single person who just got a teaching assistant job that can't afford, $1,000 a month. So, maybe the concept of restricting zoning to single family housing is not allowing that missing middle housing to exist, but maybe it's district or, neighborhood specific. So maybe that makes sense near SUNY Plattsburgh, but in other neighborhoods around the city, we could allow for, a single family home to turn into a duplex.
And that's already there. I mean, except for if you look at something a bit odd like Waterhouse Street, where long ago they voted in a sense to change themselves from R2 back to R1 because they didn't want any further conversions on Waterhouse Street. And again, there's lots of housing available, Saley Avenue, whatever. You're usually driving to work. So it's not like you're walking to your job and you need to be near SUNY. And if that's the case, there's still walking distance apartments now that the footbridge is open. Anyway, I'm just thinking perhaps if we were going to look at what's appropriate for near SUNY, we should be looking at like Ithaca's zoning and zoning that is where you've got neighborhoods that are right next to a college campus and the rental pressure for student housing is immense. And the opportunity for people to make money charging those rents is there. So they're never, ever going to be a middle level type housing because of the landlords. Okay.
Well, and you mentioned Ithaca, but there's, I remember when I was the assessor, I got to know a few of the assessors out in that region, but the city of Cortland and city of Oswego, extremely similar in a lot of ways to Plattsburgh.
The pressure of
having the
doing
SUNY, having, a high percentage of nonprofit or exempt properties within the city. And I haven't looked into their zoning, but I know definitely in Oswego, just what the mayor had done with trying to, I mean, this is more budgetary, but just trying to decrease some of the huge expenses that cities incorporate typically, and having such high exempt properties. But anyway, those, I don't know if either of those have done something. I don't know if Cortland's on a lake, but I know Oswego is kind of like us. So those might be places to look into too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take a look. Any other thoughts?
I think Reg hit on it real briefly, I think a little bit in terms of one of your bullet points, like renewable energy or conservation. In the city of Plattsburgh, I think one of the key partnerships is the municipal lighting department, and determining what are what are available through that program, and what supports can be given to the community in terms of renewable energy. Because quite frankly, power is so cheap in the city.
Yeah.
Very tough to convince someone to, solar's a good idea, or, LED bulbs are a good thing, but beyond that, to get someone to convert away from power is a tough thing.
Yeah, Jim, if you could convince my husband to put solar panels on our new garage, I'd be really indebted to you. Don't need it. The electricity's cheaper. You know how many years it would take for that to pay back itself?
That's the exact discussion. But truthfully, once again, the lighting department is going to be the one to to assist in some of those programs and those incentives that maybe bring people to that point.
I mean, or maybe it's bigger. Maybe there's development incentives for, larger commercial developments, that if you build to certain energy standards, you can have, less green space. You know what I mean? Like some sort of incentive to build to that climate smart community standard, and you'll get something back from the city for it.
Yeah. Something along the lines of power, and I don't know if this falls under what we're talking about, but any kind of incentive or motivation for, as properties are getting developed, to have the power lines that go in be underground. Because, again, having all of our power above ground with the reality of snow and ice, it continues to mean that we have to chop trees off so only half a tree can grow on the street, because otherwise you've got boughs over power lines, etc. And the money's not there to just convert the whole city. But is there a strategy whereby going forward power lines would be installed underground?
I believe that might be one of our local laws, that it's a requirement for new development to bury power lines. I can look into it though, and if not, we can identify that.
I think that's another once again, another discussion. I mean, with new, it's something definitely that can be, but another discussion with MLD and the Common Council to see what can be implemented.
Right.
I think in terms of other communities, Rouse's Point is a great one to look at. They somehow made an investment and a plan and buried a lot of power.
Really? I have to look into that. I know I drive down Miller Street every day to come into work, and I look around and I'm like, God, there is so much visual noise on Miller Street, and all of it is power poles.
Absolutely. And here on Cumberland Ave, I've got a tree right outside my window here that, it's a beautiful old tree, but it's got to come down, because it's literally like the tree is practically grown over and around the transformer. And so the city keeps chopping at it, but so now it's got half of it is growth, the other half of it has all been chopped off, and it's ghastly. But if all the lines are underground and there was a system in place and encouragement in place, and we had a policy in place that, by the way, if you're creating something, we're gonna put it underground as opposed to stick it up on a pole.
Right.
Rick, you're muted.
I mean, imagine if the power lines up on Cornelia are underground in terms of, you know, when you get up to Stewart's and Big Lots and, you know, when you start getting to Uptown there, you know, if we got rid of the power lines, we could put trees in.
Yep. When the town developed their smart growth plan, they had the consultant do a few renderings of Route 3 with those power lines gone and some more green space, trees, extended sidewalks, etc. And I think their hope is to send all of that to the DOT, because the DOT hasn't redone that section of Route 3 in, I think, 10 years. And I think they technically or usually look at, you know, sections of road that are that, you know, heavy in traffic every 10 years. So they're hoping to give those plans to the DOT and say, hey, look, this is what we want, invest some money.
Oh, that would be great. Can you imagine if we had trees up there instead of power lines?
It would look completely different. It'd be a town
Oh.
center.
Should there be something in here, Milena, about ongoing stakeholder engagement? Beyond the initial development of the plan, having, you know, an ongoing group that continues to drive the plan going forward.
Sure. Ongoing stakeholder engagement. Yeah, you're right. I mean, like Rick had said, the city has lots and lots and lots of plans, and that's what they are. They're plans that, you know, go and sit on a shelf and get dusty. And we don't want this to be one of those. We want this to be one of those plans that we reference at our planning board meetings. We want it to be one of those plans that informs our zoning code that we can enforce. So I think that's very important to keep this plan's momentum moving forward.
Good.
Reg, when you talk about stakeholders, like who would, for example, who would the stakeholders be?
Business owners might be a group of stakeholders. Apartment owners might be a group of stakeholders. You know, neighborhoods, obviously.
Okay,
I think
good.
it would serve us well to define who those key stakeholders are, to your point, Loretta.
Yeah, it'd be good. I mean, I was just wondering who, if it was government entities that you had in mind or the general
Yeah,
population.
SUNY is a stakeholder, as somebody mentioned earlier, I think, Jim.
Mhm.
It's
Oh, just
pretty
an
diverse
FYI.
group.
Oh. Go ahead, Reg.
I'm just saying it's a pretty diverse group.
Yeah. Well, the more diverse, the better.
Exactly, I agree.
And FYI, Milena, Brian Hartman, in addition to Bill Laundrie, is no longer at SUNY. He retired in April, but might be available for, you know, some kind of, he's a good friend of mine. Someone to represent SUNY in discussions going forward.
Okay.
Rick, I think you had a point, if you can get off mute.
He's lost his picture and his voice.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
Unmute, Rick, unmute.
Now I've got him twice.
Yeah.
I had 2 Ricks for a while too.
Yeah.
Rick, we can't hear you.
Now I know what to do to unmute my phone.
There we go.
My computer continues to lock up on me, so I'm going between my phone and my computer. Anyway, to all of your points regarding landscape and trees, after the ice storm, you know, I remember very specifically being in a meeting with George Pataki and Andrew Cuomo. They gave the city a whole lot of money, and the intent was to never repeat the sins of the past, which was to erect power lines that were susceptible to be blown down and knocked down by trees again. They gave the city the money with the intent to bury all underground power lines. Okay. So again, you know, we didn't learn from our sins of the past. We just ignored them told everybody we knew better. Well, in all actuality, maybe we should start paying attention and taking the advice of people that, have the expertise, and let's start looking progressively at what the remedies are.
Yeah, cheaper is not always better.
No, especially when they gave you the money to do it.
So what happened to the money?
The money went to rebuild the pools just as they were
Oh, God.
and cut down zillions of trees.
Yeah, well, I remember that. That was, yeah,
Oh, believe me, I lived it.
I lived it too.
Oh, but anyway, to all of your points, yes, let's be progressive about it and, learn from those experiences and make it a better place. Let's not repeat the same mistakes.
Milena, you shared the Burlington Comprehensive Plan. Have you looked at any other municipalities and
I have.
put together recent comprehensive plans?
I have looked at a few other ones. There's one I have in front of me right now from the city of Driggs, Idaho, which I also really liked. And Councilor Barbell sent me a strategic investment plan, which is a little bit different than the comp plan, but very similar. That also had a great layout. So the reason that I really liked the Burlington plan was essentially that because of the way that it's laid out. So the document sets the vision for Burlington with a number of different themes. So it dives into what those themes are. For example, they want Burlington to be a dynamic city, an inclusive city. And then under those themes, they set goals. How do we become an inclusive city? How do we become a dynamic city? And then underneath those goals is action items. What actions can we take to achieve those goals? So I liked the format of it because it seemed like it was easy to read through. It was something that could be implemented versus, just saying, well, we want, Plattsburgh to put some money into our parks. Like, okay, well then how do we do that? So I liked the way that it was set up and the way that it reads through. And I think that our comp plan could be very similar to that. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, our current existing comp plan is very zoning heavy with recommendations for different areas of the city. And I think, we can still build upon that, but we don't really need to be that zoning heavy this time around because we are going to be updating our zoning ordinance at the same time that we're doing this. And like Marissa said, we already know what's going to happen to the base. I mean, it already happened. Obviously, there's still future development to occur there, but we're not at a place like we were back in the 90s. So that was just a great example, I think. And, we'll keep doing more research, and Saratoga Associates as our consultant will be drafting this document. And I'm sure they have plenty of examples too that are newer plans that'll get us to where we want to go.
Great, thanks.
Have you noticed in any of the plans that they've become more visual? One thing that I'd like to see is we be more visual, have illustrations that they really go a long way.
Oh, absolutely. And you can speak to this, Rick. I know a lot of zoning codes are going that way too. So, instead of a developer guessing where the setbacks need to be on a corner lot, there's actually a diagram that shows this is what it should look like on that corner lot. So I think visuals are important both in the comp plan and the zoning ordinance.
Yes, absolutely. We experimented, with that, the design of downtown concept, where we had those shingle type signs, which I think that downtown designing concept is really something we should explore, but we used some kind of visuals, or we experimented with them. And I thought that was a pretty effective concept. I'd like to see more of that.
Okay, noted.
I have a couple other questions, Milena. At the beginning of the meeting, Jim touched on the fact that the last time this took almost 3 years, and there was some grant funding involved. And I'm just wondering about, any timeline at this point and what the resource requirements might look like.
Yep, absolutely. So the city was awarded, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's close to $125,000. And then $125,000 is split between finalizing the LWRP, which isn't much work. It's really a prescriptive process with the DOS. So now that we have the document finalized, we have to hold a public meeting and then we can send that to them. It goes through their board process, takes 60 days, blah, blah, blah. So that's not going to eat up a lot of the money. I think the comp plan and zoning ordinance are going to take a bulk of that $125,000. Right now, the city does not have to put any match in. So, and I don't believe that they would anyway because of economics. So our cap really is that 125 grand. So we're going to try to get as much done as we can with that money. The turnaround time that our consultants gave us was 18 months for all 3 of those documents. So I think we're on a pretty good timeline right now. I think they were estimating maybe December of next year to be done all 3.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have any more comments, questions, ideas?
What's the ideal time frame for one of these things? Should we be trying to look forward, 3 to 5 years or 10 years, or what's the current thinking on that?
For the comp plan to be completed?
No, in terms of, as we look forward and as we vision, when does it need to be refreshed? I'm certain the cycle is shorter than every 20 years.
They recommend every 10 years.
Okay. So that's kind of our horizon looking forward.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, unless the laws changed, the comprehensive plan is not an enforceable document. It's the purpose and intent behind what your zoning regulation is. So it's more of a supportive document than it is an enforceable document.
And if someone wants to sue you over a new zoning code, they look back to the comprehensive plan and they make sure that your zoning is grounded in the plan.
That is correct.
Which is why I think it's great that we're updating both of these documents at the same time.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's necessary. It's your basis.
Yep. So I am going to take all of the notes that I got from you guys today. I will put that in a 1-page summary sheet and send that around to you. Rick and Kurt are both on the public advisory committee for this update. So they'll be joining us again, I think around the 28th of the week of the 28th to do the same session. And then after that, we'll create a vision statement and then take that to the public and get their feedback. So Rick and Kurt will be your liaisons back to the board and give you updates as you need them and want them. But I will send the notes around to you guys though.
I've got one sort of final comment that actually is spurred by something Milena shared with us. Chuck Marone, who is a guy who, did I pronounce his name right, Milena, that article you
I
sent?
want to say Marin, but it could be.
Oh, I thought it was Marone. But anyway, he has actually a group Facebook thing that you can join, which I joined, and they don't update it much though. But he wrote a book called Smart Towns, and I am about halfway through it. It's an easy read. I just read it before I go to sleep though, so I only get through about a page at a time. But it's called Smart Towns, and it is fabulous, absolutely fabulous. This guy has spent a lifetime working with towns like Plattsburgh and preparing for what he believes is going to be a real migration to smaller cities and towns going forward. And, I think I really believe that it's in our best interest to, starting today, be planning for a lot of people moving to this area. The reality of life on the West Coast and life on the South Coast is becoming unbearable for people, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. And the New York Times just did a really interesting article about what they see as a massive migration to the Northeast. And that's us. And, between COVID and the realities of climate change, we're a really great area to live in. And, we know that. And it seems like almost inevitable that a lot of other people are going to start to gravitate to it. So if anyone wants to read this book, again, it's called Smart Towns. It's by Charles Marohn, Marohn, and it's just, you know, it's not complicated. It's not technical. I just love it. It's really, really good.
I think that's a great point, Loretta, to add to our, comp plan conversation is preparing for migration. So what would the city have to do that? Do we need housing? Do we need more infrastructure? Do we have enough services to support a population increase in the next 5 to 10 years? So I definitely I jotted that down.
I mean, I know that for people who have Airbnbs, they were able to charge whatever they wanted this whole summer because there was a migration of not only people from New York City, but people from the Mid-Atlantic during COVID. And they just did not want to spend COVID where they lived. And they came up here and said, oh my goodness, this is amazing. It's beautiful. I can work from home. I don't need to be in a big city. And I think we're going to see a lot of influx. And these are people who have money, they've got good paying jobs. If you can work from home, it's because you've got a good paying job.
Okay. Well, I think if no one else has any other comments, we are right around 1:30, which I think was the limit. So, Melina, did you have any other thoughts to close on, or?
No, just, as I said before, I will put our notes together. I'll send those around to everybody, and your two liaisons will keep you updated as needed, and so will I. But thank you, everybody. I appreciate the feedback. This is exactly what we were looking for to be able to move forward.
Thank you for setting it up. I guess since we opened the board, maybe probably need a motion to close the board meeting.
Motion.
Motion by Rick,
Yep.
second by Derek, and all in favor?
Bye.
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 Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.